Hello and welcome to the Outdoor Recreation Council of BC's March webinar. My name is Ryan Stewart and I'm hosting today's webinar. I'm going to give folks a few minutes to log in, and while they'll do that, I'd love to get a sense of who else is out there. The format of this webinar is such that we can't see you. We can only see the panelists. And so I'm going to ask that everybody jump into the chat there, and you can address your message to everyone. Give us your name, your location, the organization when you're with, and then maybe a little fun fact, something that outdoorsy that's kind of intrigues you or is curious about, maybe one of the places that you like to get out and recreate. I'll give you an example. I've put the questions in the chat there if anyone's just logging in and missed out on what I was asking there. I live in the Comox Valley on Vancouver Island, and one of the coolest pieces of kind of history or heritage around here are these fish trap complexes throughout the Comox Harbor in the estuary of the Puntledge River. There are all these wooden stumps sticking up out of the mud, and they look like they're just random barnacle-covered sticks. But when some archaeologists mapped them out, they realized these weren't random at all. They were carefully constructed fish traps for catching salmon and herring by the Comox people. Some of them date back more than 1,000 years, and they're easily seen throughout the harbor at low tide. So there's my fun fact. I just love going out there and kind of seeing these things and thinking about how long they've been there and what all they've seen. So while the rest of you weigh in, I'll also let you know about today's webinar. We're going to learn about citizen-based reconciliation and the ORCBC's Reconciliation Committee. We're recording, and we'll share a link later this week along with some key takeaways and other bits of information that we've learned today. We'll finish around 1 p.m. I'll also mention that the Reconciliation Committee will be part of the ORCBC's conference coming up in May. I'll share a little bit more about that in a minute. I'm also going to pop into the chat a link to the conference agenda for anyone that is curious. Okay, so we're getting some great responses here. Reintroduction of bison and Banff. All kinds of fun stuff. Okay, well, I think we'll get going with the webinar. We've got lots to cover. I'm just going to share my screen. All right, so again, my name is Ryan Stewart, and I work on community engagement with the ORCBC. That includes organizing and hosting webinars. Welcome today's. It's based on citizen-based reconciliation. We've assembled a stacked panel to unpack the concept, show some examples of what this can look like, and mostly highlight how working on reconciliation brings positives to everyone involved. But first, let's jump into some housekeeping. So here's today's agenda. I'll provide a short introduction and then hand things over to our guests for their presentation. We'll have a dedicated question and answer session after all 5 of them have had a chance to speak. And if you have any questions during the webinar, just post them into the Q&As or into the chat. One of our guests might answer them directly if they have a chance, and otherwise I'll do my best to ask them during the question and answer session. We'll wrap things up right around 1 p.m. Immediately following the webinar is a super short survey. Please stick around to fill it out. It really does help us do a better job with these webinars, and it gives you a chance to give us feedback about the webinar and about any other topics that you'd like us to see cover in the future. Today's webinar is made possible by the Real Estate Foundation of BC. It's part of a series of webinars related to reconciliation and Indigenous relationship building. The Foundation's goal is to advance sustainable, equitable, and socially just land use and real estate practices. REFBC is committed to supporting reconciliation with Indigenous people and working in partnership with First Nations. Thank you to REFBC for making today's webinar possible. I would also like to mention that I feel lucky to live, work, and recreate on the traditional territories of the Comox people here on Vancouver Island. This webinar is part of a monthly series hosted by the Outdoor Recreation Council of BC. The ORCBC represents more than 100 nonprofit organizations who in turn represents 100,000 British Columbians, snowmobilers and hunters, anglers and hikers, conservation organizations, and mountain bike clubs. The ORCBC is the only provincial organization that represents everyone whose passion is recreating in nature. We do this in many ways, including advocacy, capacity building, and education. This year, the ORCBC is also hosting a conference. It's to celebrate the 50th anniversary of the organization and to gather the outdoor recreation community to prepare for the next 50 years. The conference is in Kamloops, May 20th to 22nd. There's a link in the chat to the agenda. And you can also jump over to orcbc.ca conference to learn more about it. Our early bird pricing ended last week, but if you use this code at checkout, you'll get $50 off the registration. So ORCBC, save 50 for that discount. Okay, on to today's webinar. We have 5 guests with us today, so I'll just introduce them quickly. Rod Clapton is the president of the BC Federation of Drift Fishers. Rod Peters, who I'm not sure if he was able to make it. He's the member of the Seabird Island Band and a delegate to the Lower Fraser Fisheries Alliance. Hopefully he'll be able to log in here in the next few minutes. Norman Marcy is president of the BC Marine Trails. Morris Proser is the counselor for the Chulath First Nation and co-chair of the First Nations BC Wildlife and Habitat Conservation Forum. And Liam Regan is BC Nature's Key Biodiversity Program Manager. Thank you all for being here. We're going to start things off with Rod, who's going to tell us a little bit about the Reconciliation Committee. And I've pulled up our the statement for him to get us started. If that's a good place to start, Rod, is that right?
Perfect. Thank you very much. Good afternoon to everybody. Pleasure to be here today. Just very briefly, the Outdoor Recreation Council certainly recognized that reconciliation is a priority issue now and going forward, which created the establishment of the committee in 2023. Norman, for example, is one of the members of our committee on the panel here today. Very robust conversations, as you can appreciate, took place from the start and do continue healthy conversations. They resulted in a professional facilitator being hired who helped us establish a terms of reference in 2024. And basically established, which we're going to get to here, the ORC statement on citizen-based reconciliation. So I will just run through that. Starting top, the basis for citizen-based reconciliation is the acknowledgement of past injustices and the commitment to working with Indigenous peoples to rectify them. CBR means local recreation and Indigenous communities working together directly through respectful person-to-person dialogue to build relationships and address shared challenges. Constitutionally protected rights for all citizens must be acknowledged and respected. Access and opportunities for all citizens must remain a priority in reconciliation discussions, ensuring that reconciliation efforts do not compromise the public interest in fair and open access to Crown lands. ORC can provide guidance and support for citizen-based reconciliation efforts. ORCBC should not engage in legal or constitutional advocacy, as these issues are outside of the ORCBC mandate. Citizen-based reconciliation is based on respect for the diversity of views across the outdoor and Indigenous communities. True reconciliation requires everyone to seek meaningful ways to contribute. I think, I'm sure as all here can appreciate that a considerable amount of thought went into this. A lot of wordsmithing took place to come up with a final document that is here. And this is a living document. Changes will take place as required going forward. So that's the basic statement on citizen-based reconciliation. Now, some of personal experiences regarding reconciliation that have taken place over the past 2 decades include, of course, the ORC Reconciliation Committee, the Sports Fish Advisory Board Reconciliation Committee, which I chair as well. And we're just going to take a moment here and acknowledge the origins of a lot of this, particularly in the Fraser River, because with the organization I represent, which is part of the public fishery, the fisheries end of it has been our main focus regarding reconciliation. So Ryan, if you could bring up the slides on the Fraser River Peacemakers. Perfect. Okay, I'm going to go through these briefly. This was established in 2009 and it ran until 2015, which then morphed into what is currently the Lower Fraser Collaborative Table, and people like Rod Peters, for example, are sitting on this committee. Next screen, please. Interestingly, what happened in 2009, there was an episode on the Fraser River, a very violent episode between a recreation fisher and a respected Chehalis First Nations chief. And that led to getting together and trying to determine how we can eliminate some of this conflict, how we can learn to get along and develop respect. And one thing that did lead into this was really interesting, a trail on the Chehalis River, which of course is where the Stalis Nation has is headquartered. Pardon me, I've got a terrible head cold. I'm trying to get through this here. Anyhow, the trail took a period of months, many organizations involved, and it certainly demonstrated how Indigenous and non-Indigenous communities can work together to provide fisheries for both, respectful fisheries. Next screen, please. Let's jump to the next one, please. Okay. Again, this is some of the action plan items listed: catch monitoring, conflict resolution, crowding and access, education, safety, and stewardship. This is the basis of the Fraser River Peacemakers as established in September of 2009. Next slide, please. We actually produced a video called River Manners, which was put together professionally, including both Indigenous and non-Indigenous fishers, as demonstrated here. Well received. That still is available. I believe it's on YouTube, and we actually have some copies of that video from that time as well, and certainly applicable now as it was in March 2010, demonstrating how the sectors can get together. Next slide, please. This is one of the things that we did with Peacemakers, what we called river outings, where dealing with people, as you can see in the top left picture, Ernie Cray, of course, was involved with us at the time, and a lot of on-river dealing with people, trying to educate them how the communities can get together on the river, how there can be peace and cooperation on the river. And these were some pretty interesting outings that we had. So next screen. Next screen, just jump by that one if you like. This is part of the official training. We have some very established people, leaders in the reconciliation community. Number of meetings like this took place initially in 2011 and continued for a number of years. So next slide, please. This is some of the posters, signage that we put out through Peacemakers that were on the river, and and posters that were notices sent out to different organizations, social media, etc., advising people, and not just the cooperation end of it, but the safety, which is, of course, extremely important. And that was a cooperative effort of the Peacemakers. So next slide. Again, field tours, consultation. We had meetings at many of the First Nations headquarters, First Nations communities, et cetera, I should say. And part of it was trying to eliminate problems such as parking and on the side of the major roads, et cetera, which was a major safety issue. And that's sort of some of the initiatives that we were looking at. So next slide. Let's jump to the next one, could we please? Yeah, this was an award that was presented to a gentleman, Chris Gosling, who is the RCMP mediator, the RCMP coordinator between First Nations and non-Indigenous people. And Chris did a lot of work, and we actually presented him with an award for all his service and all his efforts in trying to keep the peace and help establish the communication between the communities. So next slide. Again, another 2012, we had what's called the Fraser River Festival. We dealt with other organizations like Watershed Watch, et cetera, were included. And there was static displays, representative of First Nations fisheries, recreational fisheries. We had the Coast Guard involved, DFO, of course, involved, putting on demonstrations, and a wonderful indication of how the communities could get together. This is, by the way, at Island 22 on the Fraser, which is a great location for this sort of thing, demonstrated how the communities could get together and get this message out to the public at large. Next slide. Again, part of the PFD Youth Survey in 2012, talking to anglers on the river, those that were launching at Island 22, trying to encourage them to use the PFDs and ensure safety on the river. So next slide. We established the terms of reference in 2013. I think we actually had, if I remember correctly, 12 or 13 draft terms of reference before we finally came up with a final copy, which again, the terms of reference from the peacemakers morphed into the terms of reference that was established for the Lower Fraser Collaborative Table, which the Fraser River peacemakers actually morphed into, became larger, encompassed the LFFA in total, Lower Fraser Fisheries Alliance, 23 First Nations on the Lower River, I guess from Tsawwassen up to basically Boston Bar, excuse me, commercial fisheries, and of course the public fishery. I think that might be the last one, Ryan. No, if jump one more, please. I think that was a logo we established. We actually had things like PDFs that we had created and were given out to organizations and people and sold, et cetera. Very, very well received. So next, if there's more there. Yeah, future topics. Again, I mean, these were critical issues at the time, and I have to say they're still critical issues today. And advancing stewardship and conservation, of course, that's a key in developing our youth, both Indigenous and non-Indigenous youth, as the future stewards of the resource. So that's really one of our major goals in the past, and I'd like to believe it's certainly a major goal going forward. Next slide. That might be it. Perfect. Okay. Well, thank you very much. I said I was going to be brief, and I was, I hope. And if I stayed within the time limit, so do I get a prize, Ryan?
You did a great job, Rod, and especially considering that you got a cold and you're nursing it. So we appreciate you coming out anyway
Thank you.
and pushing through. I've heard you talk about the peacemakers before. You and I've had this conversation, and one of the things that always stuck with me from you telling it was how you sort of bridged it when there was that first conflict, the first conflicts on the river that really blew up, and they were very heated. How did you sort of create some common ground or somewhere to start the conversation when there was that tension, then thick tension?
There's actually a phrase that came out of that, which I've used more than once, that conflict is the energy and opportunity to solve problems. And we embrace that concept. Relatively sane, wise minds, I guess, appreciate the fact that if we didn't do something fairly soon after the incident in the Fraser River, where it was Chief Willie Charlie was actually shot in the face with a pellet gun, very serious situation, had the potential of blowing up into heavens, who knows what. So over coffee, there was 3 or 4 of us got together from the two communities, said, okay, what are we going to do here? This thing is going to blow up. It's going to cause nothing but problems. So that was really the seed that initiated the start of the peacemakers almost 2 decades ago now, and has progressed since then into even a larger organization. And there are current issues outside, which I won't get into today, major issues that are impacting on some of our discussions. But we've spent two decades, and the goal in mind was to provide safe, respectful fisheries, and also to learn more about each other's fisheries, which we've done over the last number of years.
Yeah, so it was that, like, finding that common ground of, hey, both of us are concerned about what's going on here. Let's just sit down across the table and get to know each other, right? Like, and I think you sort of touched on it a minute ago too, that idea of this is for the next generation. Like we're invested in this now because we care we want our kids to have that same experience, that sort of stuff.
That was certainly the common thread, Ryan. Yes, for all future generations.
Yeah, wonderful. Thank you very much, Rod. I'll turn things over to Norman. It doesn't look like Rob Peters has made it. So,
I see
Norman, do you
Rod
want to?
just joined us.
Oh, he did. Excellent. Good timing. Rod, welcome to the webinar. Rod, Clapton was just telling us about the peacemakers. Maybe you can talk a little bit about your experiences with the peacemakers and on from there.
Yeah, sure. So I'm very glad to be on this webinar today to help you with reconciliation. Um, I'm a fisherman at Seabird and also up Yale, wind dry fish when it's time. Um, I've been on the LFFA for a number of years now as a delegate and alternate. There's two of us. Sally Hope is the primary, and she's also the co-chair from Seabird on the LFFA. And in that group, it's up to 30 nations on the call when they're readily available. We have tier 1, tier 2 with DFO, and also with other stakeholders. But with the Lower Fraser Collaborative Table, it's been a really good journey. I was aware of the video that Rod showed on the safety on the river from Stalis. If you go to the Stalis Band website, it's also on there. I know Jim Butt Charlie or Jim Butt Leon, who was on that helped create it. And with that, it bridged with the sport fisherman world on to be respectful and aware of their surroundings of when they can, cast out their lines, and when the drift net goes down, just pull out for a while and then you can keep fishing. So really good model for the world and province A to see the fishermen. Because there are many other incidents on the river that weren't recorded either with DFO or with the police. But since I've been on the Lower Fraser Collaborative Table, what we did was, yes, we had meetings inside at the Clarion or Chilliwack, but what I told the committee was, let's get out in the water together and share our stories. So we actually did that a year and a half ago at Chiam. Chiam First Nation hosted us, and they had a fire. The chief welcomed us. The knowledge keepers were there. And then we divided up the group into two boats. And Dean Work was one of the operators. And I believe Murray from Chilliwack was the other operator from the Eco Tours at Harrison. And what a great interaction, sharing stories upriver. We actually drove up to Hurling Island and saw the Seabird Island area and Chiam Indian Reserve number 2 area, fishing sites. Told stories about, like the whole fish cycle, like Illigan, the spring, the sockeye, pink, chum, coho and steelhead, and also the sturgeon, the strong fish. They take a stronghold and live a long time. But I just wanted to share that our relationship was really good. And there was even at one time in one of the meetings that they said you could feel the tension in the room. Well, that's an example of coming together and sitting down and not just following terms of reference, but working together for all the salmon, for all the people that access it from the side of the river and on the river. So, but thank you for allowing me to share my part. And if any of you want a tour up our dry rock in Yale, willing to give that in the springtime if you're interested. And Ryan has my information to contact. So thank you for listening.
Thanks, Rod. That's a generous invitation there, and it's one I look forward to taking you up on at some point. So I love that idea of getting out in the boat together and having that shared experience. Did you like what kind of what was that like for kind of creating different relationship with the folks that you're on this table with?
Well, for example, the boat operators really, have to know how to read that water where it's low and it's fishing. So some fish with pole lines with anchors out in the river with a jug and pulley, and um, it was just good to see the land because the land, water, and mountains is our constitution. So that's what looks after us. And yeah, but sharing the stories of the fish that are in the water, the species, and the season, and just great interaction, a lot of questions. But all of us learned something that day, and even DFO was there, so they got a grasp of it too. Thank you.
Yeah, that's nice. I've always found having those experiences together changes your relationship with people. Going out and being on the land or the river or wherever it is, it really does sort of create a different bond, a different relationship than you had beforehand. So thanks so much for sharing that with us. We'll hand things over to Norman. Norman. Oh, yeah. Yeah, go ahead.
So, but I know um, uh, forests, yeah, uh, so before, before, so,
You're breaking up a bit there, Rod. Do you want to just try one more time saying that? We couldn't quite understand you.
I just wanted to say Rod Clapton's on the call, and also Mike Ford, commercial. What did created just fresh up, just go to a meeting and share ideas and for conservation and that. It went further than that. It went on a personal note to be friends. So I just wanted to address that. Thank you.
All right. So yeah, you've become personal friends. It's not just that professional relationship. Yeah. All right. Excellent. Thank you, Rod. I appreciate it. Norman, should we I'll pull up some slides for you there. Is that where you want to
Yeah, sure,
start?
that'd be great. I'll speak to them, but not read them out. Um, just to minor correction, I'm not the president of BC Marine Trails, but was the former chair of our First Nation Engagement Committee, and really started a long road for BC Marine Trails in developing our our approach to reconciliation and engagement. Um, the key element, I think, for any organization who wants to develop better relations with First Nations is to make an organizational commitment and make a commitment to work with First Nations. BC Marine Trails mission statement is says clearly to work with First Nations and other stakeholders to pursue uh, concurrence for use of sites on the BC coast, and so that is the underpinning of everything we do, whether it's stewardship activities or outreach and education of recreational users that use our resources or whatever. So um, we've since developing that concept and embedding it in our strategic plan in the years prior to 2016, we've been able to engage with over 50 First Nations of the 74 that we count on the coast, kind of in the marine environment. I recognize there's other First Nations up the Fraser and so on that we are not engaging with, don't include in that 74, but it is um, well over a third of the First Nations in the province. So that's a huge task to try and overcome. Um, and whereas government will try to um, consult with nations because of the current legal structures that are required. Consultation is required with nations. Uh, BC Marine Trails not being a government, we seek concurrence from First Nations, which is much more collaborative and less confrontational, and frankly takes much less time once the relationships are developing. And so that's really a part of where we're at. Um, government approvals to try and get a recreation site through the Lands Act or the Forest Act would take us years in previous iterations of our efforts as an organization. It might take us years with a First Nation to build that relationship, but once the relationship is developing, we can recognize the rights of nations, direct our engagements specifically to their issues and to the desires of the recreation community, and reconcile those two things. And it's much done in a much more informal way, much like what we've heard from the two Rods here about going out in boats with the stream keepers or the guardians, stewards from the various First Nations, and examining sites and developing marine trails together. I think we can go to the next slide. So there's a reflection of our mission statement, and collaboration is key for us, and the upholding of First Nation interests. So when we get direction from a nation about management within a territory, places that are in the First Nations view, places where visitation is not welcome, we take those places off our map, and we reflect First Nations management directives for use and stewardship, and code of practice for visitation, to let you see what are some of the things that we've been able to achieve. I'll just go to the next slide. So here we've ensured that we identify and validate sites and seek concurrence. And if you go to BC Marine Trails website, this map will come up, and as you zoom in, there will be 700 sites that have been approved by First Nations, a whole additional group of sites, probably not quite as many, maybe another 500, that we are still working on with First Nations, or that we hope to work on with First Nations up and down the coast where we haven't been able to develop our relationships yet. That's over 700 tent sites, 300 launch sites in addition, many day use areas, 350 or 375 day use areas, emergency pullouts, and so on. And in the process of engaging with nations, we have removed sites from our map, either by eliminating the icon that shows that site, or by actually putting an icon that says that site is closed for whatever reasons. We don't need to know what the cultural or spiritual or harvesting or other reasons that a nation has for a site being removed, or where visitation is not welcome. We just honor that thought and honor those directives, and that helps us build our relationship and is the stuff of reconciliation. I'll go to the next slide, I think. So what can you do to pursue citizen-based reconciliation? Respect the underlying First Nation rights and title on the coast for us. That is, Aboriginal rights were there before non-Aboriginal people came to these lands, and that the rights of First Nations are those things that support their culture and their continued existence and interaction with the landscape. Their title are those places where uh, frequent use, exclusive use, and the village sites, fishing sites, other things like that. And there are parameters in law about how that is determined. But we recognize those things exist. We don't need to be and are not the people to arbitrate what those rights are or what those titles are, but we recognize they exist and move from there into um, leading, learning, and discussing with indigenous issues with our peers and reflecting our understandings about Aboriginal issues as best we know them uh, with others. So educate your peers, educate your friends, educate other recreation organizations, and we support the many Indigenous communities that have guardian programs or stewardship programs, and where there are guidelines, and also where there are stewardship fees or visitation fees that First Nations have started to initiate. We promote the compliance with that, paying those fees that contribute to the better stewardship of the coast, and continue to reflect our support for Aboriginal rights and title along the coast. Our map is a work in progress and will always be a work in progress. We are working towards 100% concurrence from the nations. That's approval for the use on behalf of recreation community for those sites. And we will continue to do that as we move forward here. And we're very thankful to those 50 plus First Nations that have engaged with us so far. And we look forward to being engaged with the remainder and maintaining those relationships to the best of our ability as we move forward. I think that's enough from me because I only had a few minutes. There we go.
Thank you, Norman. I think there's often a concern or a feeling in the recreation community of when we have to give things up, access to places or opportunities to do things. And I mean, when you have pulled those 124 sites off the map or made them so that it's clear that that's not a place that recreation boaters should go, paddlers should go. What's been the response? Have there ever been any difficult conversations there with really popular places that you have to pull out of there?
Yes, I mean, even a place where there's a lot of that's gone on. There are 5 or 6 different places in the southern Gulf Islands area and the Gulf Islands where either from First Nations or private land or Parks Canada, or in our relationships with all of those agents of management, where places have been withdrawn. And because there's so much private land in the southern, in the Gulf Islands, there are very limited places really for kayakers to pull in, stop, camp, whatever. And so that has created a lot of difficulty for recreation in the Gulf Islands, which is probably one of the highest use areas. And we're endeavoring to try to be collaborative in finding solutions to that. But and even last night when I was presenting to the largest club in the country, kayak club, there was concern, and I said, "Well, that is part of reconciliation. Not all of your past practices or ability to travel wherever you want is respectful." And not always welcome. And reconciliation means finding a path that you can both walk together.
Well, thank you very much, Norma. Appreciate it. I'm going to pass things over to Morris.
Sure. Kachlapin Shagnukwa, Rapapkin Squatchich, Chlath Machakan, Stali Machakan. Hello, my name is Lapapskin, also known as Morris Prosser. I'm from the community of Shalath, which is part of the larger Statlium Nation. I'm joining you today as part of the PAPKU Quinish or Quinish Forever project team. It also includes my friend and colleague here, Liam Reagan, who I believe later will be talking a little bit more about nature clubs and their sort of role in reconciliation, including in this project that I'm going to be speaking to you about. Some of my other roles include, yes, I was the former co-chair for the First Nations BC Wildlife and Habitat Conservation Forum, and also was just recently elected as a counselor for Chalath First Nation. So, without further ado, just going to share this presentation with you, and I'll give it a second to pop up.
It's up. You're good.
Okay. So on the screen here, we're going to be talking about the fish that you see here. We know them as Quinish or black kokanee. That booted foot you see there is about a size 9 woman's boot. So that's about how big they are. Just a little bit of background about the project. So we started in about 2013 as a research project for a PhD thesis from our friend and colleague, Dr. Sarah Moritz, who currently works at Thompson Rivers University. And, since then has kept its roots to document and act on the oral history, current knowledge, and aspirations for our relationships with the Quinish and their lake homes. So, they're a species that live in our lakes, and I'll talk a little bit about that a little bit later about that. We've been working with Shalath, so although I am a current elected counselor, really this project is a collaboration between BC Nature and Shalath. So it's an Indigenous partnership. So Shalath was interested and expressed interest in gathering biological, habitat, and cultural heritage information to establish protections for the Quinish and develop Quinish-related education materials. And we also talked to other Statlium Nation members from varying communities who were also expressed an interest to learn more about Quinish. The importance of the Quinish to Shalath is that they're a unique species. So they're a deep water spawning kokanee species that are unique to our lake systems. So Shalath is situated in between Lillooet and Pemberton, in between Seton and Anderson Lakes. And there's a picture of Anderson Lake there on a place we call Nkite. And the picture below is one of the things that we utilize them for. So our cultural heritage connection goes back thousands of years. So there's oral history connecting Shalath to place for thousands of years that involve the Quinish. And they're also a winter food source for us. As you see, that's our cooking, one of the ways that we would prepare them. So that's about a 9-inch or a 10-inch skillet there. So you can get a size of that fish. That was actually cooked this winter. It was one of the first times I had actually eaten Quinish. even though, growing up knowing about them, and I never had the chance to eat them before. This is also a picture of a halout, or a bald eagle, catching Huinish. So when they spawn, they actually spawn about 80 to 100 meters down. And as they finish spawning, they their air bladders or swim bladders blow up, and then they float to the surface where people catch them, and also where bald eagles harvest them as well. So, and just enacting on the wishes of Shalath. Part of the project plan is to conduct studies on Quinish, including some field work. We're looking to develop an animated graphic novel or comic in English and Statlingwitch, which is our language, targeted to the school system, so that there's always that passing on of knowledge about the Quinish. We're also doing biological and environmental studies of the Quinish's spawning habitat. And we've also identified Quinish habitat in surrounding areas, currently working towards a key biodiversity area, but then that might ladder into an Indigenous protected and conserved area. So our work to date, we've engaged with and created a project team in partnership with Nature Canada and BC Nature that was to pursue project support and possible funding. So with that, we're able to bring on BC Nature as a partner in this work for project admin, as well as funding proposal support. And in 2015, we received, or in 2025, we received funding from the Watershed Security Fund to begin community planning, and that also supported 2 field seasons. So another thing to note is that these Quinish spawn in the wintertime, usually between November in Seton Lake and December, January in Anderson Lake. So we had to deal with sort of winter weather conditions as we were out doing some field work. Field work included beach walks, but as well as running some transects, or essentially some boat tours of the lakes to look for both Quinish, indications of their spawning spots, and then also eagle counts as well, just as an approximation of where they might spawn. This also included the Lillooet Naturalists Club, which took which was greatly appreciated. And we've also listed Quinish in the Nature Serves Biotics database. Liam can correct me on this, but I believe they're sockeye salmon population 34 or 39 or something like that. I'll just quickly touch on this picture. So on the left there is retired Dr. Ian Routley, one of the Lillooet Naturalists Club members, and on the right there in the Vizzy vest is one of the Shalath elders, Ivan John, who joined us this year. And I'd just like to say Cookstem. So this last picture is a picture of both me and Liam actually roasting some Quinish that we harvested on the fire. It was one of our traditional ways of preparing these fish. So Cookstem, thank you.
Thanks, Morris. What was it like to eat Quinish for the first time? What did that feel like for you?
Well, to me, it was first curiosity, right? So I'd never gotten the chance to eat Quinish before. And I grew up with stories and information about how we as a people would utilize the resource, but I never got to try it before. And yeah, this time around, it was actually kind of, I'd say, really fulfilling to do that because we were actually able to share it with a number of people, right? So my uncle Hoagie John cooked the fish for us because I'd never experienced cooking it before, right? And we were actually able to share it with about uh, 8 other people who were there, right? So the day that we harvested that fish, there was actually an atmospheric river, and there was a couple landslides that blocked the road into our valley. So I invited people down to um, our place here in Shalath or Seton Portage, and we were actually able to share that fish. So, that's kind of part of that hospitality, but also I think like what any community of people does is right is share resources and food. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, that's really nice. Unfortunate about the atmospheric river, but the rest of it sounds like a great day. So, I'll hand things over to Liam.
Oh, thank you very much. And yeah, I'll add on the experience of eating Wanish. I spoke to Chief Doug Naisloss from Kitasoo up north once, and he was talking about the role of traditional knowledge with traditional foods being more than just aesthetic important and all that, being a matter of survival. And I think when you're taking dead fish off a lake, that's and figuring out when you can eat them, how you can eat them, how to stay safe. It's a matter of survival, right? Traditional knowledge is how do you safely eat this fish? And it was pleasingly gelatinous. So for for anyone curious, that was my take. But yeah, thanks for the introduction. My name is Liam Reagan. I am the BC KBA manager for BC Nature, living here in Victoria on the territories of the Wasandish and Lekwungen. I want to keep this a little bit brief so we have time for questions for all the panelists. But for a quick intro, BC Nature is a federation of naturalist clubs with 60 clubs across the province and about 6,000 volunteers. We oversee in BC the Key Biodiversity Areas program, which is what I manage, which in a nutshell is a global effort to identify the most important places for biodiversity in the world. We work closely with Indigenous communities, kind of in the theme of everything said today. We're not just coming in to say, oh, there's X number of endangered slugs. We're working with communities to say, hey, we think we found something that could be globally recognized. Do you want that? What sort of environmental story do you want to tell? And how can this build into existing priorities that your nation might have at this time? To date, we've worked with 175 Indigenous communities across BC in the last 5 years. So we have quite a few lessons learned. I'd also like to just quickly add before moving on that before this, I worked for BC Marine Trails with Norman and Paul, who's in the audience. So a lot of what I've learned, I'd like to thank them for kind of setting me on the good path. The two main rooms I've seen for collaboration between naturalist clubs and First Nations in that outreach, 275 nations or communities, have roughly broken down into two categories. The first being capacity, the second being familiarity. In the example of the Wanish Forever project that I've been working on with Mo, it came down to capacity. We were able to do quite a bit in Shalath on Anderson Lake, but Seton Lake, as Mo mentioned, atmospheric rivers, landslides, tough road conditions, it can be quite difficult moving between the two communities. And so in that instance, we were able to bring in the Lillooet Naturalist Society to sort of fill in the space where there was limited staff capacity from the Shalath Guardians and do some more of the beach walks to get data not just from Shalath, but also from the other lake on the other side. Huge thanks to Ian Routley, Vivian Birch-Jones, and Jeff Playfair for playing a role in that. The second space I've seen opportunity for citizen-based reconciliation has been familiarity. Like I said, we've worked with 175 different communities, and that has been exclusively possible because of our network of 60 naturalist clubs and 6,000 volunteers. As many organizations working at the provincial scale, we don't have the benefit of being able to maintain deep personal relationships with the 200 plus communities across the province. That's just not something that we have the capacity to do. But by being able to rely on those local nationalist clubs and local volunteers, we can come into a situation and say, hey, here's the idea we have, here's what we think we know. I'm sitting at my desk here in Victoria. What do you, as folks who live in this community, live in this valley, live in this area, how do you think this will be received? Who should we be talking to? Do you have existing relationships with the Indigenous communities and non-Indigenous communities who are working here? And through that, rather than coming in as Joe Schmo, Liam Reagan, who likes birds and lives in Victoria, we can come in as, oh yeah, no, are these people who we've lived with our whole life, they vouch for them. They say that they're coming in with a meaningful project. We come in with local community ties, and so that can, sometimes from a functional perspective, expedite the process up to a year of, really going through introductions and making sure that people know we're here to do work in a good way. But more than that, it means that the results of the work are embedded in community, so that rather than parachuting in, doing a really great salmon survey and then leaving, we're coming in through local resources, doing work in community, and ensuring that the people doing the work, understanding the work, and interpreting the work all have a stake in the outcome of whatever project it is we're doing. So yeah, that's all I'd wanted to say. And thank you very much.
That's some great advice. So the familiarity and was the other one capacity? Is that the right way to
Capacity.
think of it? Yeah.
No.
And so the capacity is being able to provide those extra boots, those extra hands to do whatever the work is.
Yeah, and I mean, I guess is another example of that. Many of the nations we've reached out to, we've said, hey, this is a really important place for this critically endangered lichen or obscure frog. And we've heard back like, wow, that's great. We're a community of 100 people and we're trying to deal with the COVID pandemic or massive flooding or fires. We don't really have time to go and do this. But as long as we're, again, kind of approaching with that familiarity and ensuring that we're doing the work in a good way, we can ensure that we're aligning our capacity with the nation's objectives to sort of provide, okay, you need 5 people to do this. We can provide 5 volunteers. We can come in and fill in gaps where there are objectives that you want achieved, but maybe not the staff time to do so.
Yeah, nice. All right. Well, we only have a few minutes for questions, but we'll ask a few. And if anyone out in the audience wants to pose any, just pop them either in the chat or the Q&A. And we'll do our best here with the last 5 or so minutes we got. I'll start with one that was posted during registration, kind of touching on the confusion that they were feeling about engaging with First Nations when there's that constant flux and uncertainty with treaty negotiations and court cases and all that sort of stuff. I think what I've heard from everyone here is that there's a lot of value in just connecting on that citizen person to person basis and figuring these things out that way. But I'll let you all sort of weigh in on this person's sort of how do I do this if there's this uncertainty, this flux, like all that noise that goes on in the background. How do you see citizen-based reconciliation fitting into the larger government to government reconciliation process? Go ahead, Norman. Oh, can't hear you.
There's a role absolutely for citizens to change the overall culture of the relationship between the Aboriginal and non-Aboriginal people. Government to government, that's the stuff of uh, government reconciliation. The First Nations government and provincial and federal governments working together to come up with those big arrangements for land management, for resource management, for treaty, for extension of the First Nations management over their territories. Uh, but we as individual recreation organizations or as citizens need to play our part in changing the overall perceptions and the overall relationship at that granular level in the community. And that's certainly what I've dedicated a lot of my time to over the years. So I'd like
Okay.
to also point out that we have our toolkit, and Ryan, at some
Right.
point, bring that up. Yeah.
Yep. Yeah. I'll put that in the chat and I'll also include it in our takeaway stuff. Rod, go ahead.
Yeah, basically echoing what Norman just said. We've had some pretty interesting discussions, as you can appreciate, relating to some of these issues. And as I listed earlier, point number 6 on our statement on citizen-based reconciliation, we decided ORCBC should not engage in legal or constitutional advocacy as these issues are outside of the ORCBC mandate. So that's our position. Face-to-face conversation, developing respect and collaboration, stay out of the politics, stay out of the legal end of it. Just a quagmire currently.
Yeah. Mo.
Yeah, I'd just like to also say that to me, staying out of the politics is probably the best thing to do. In my role as elected councillor, I sit on some intergovernmental committees, but one of the things that I noticed in those is that we're all interested in Indigenous and non-Indigenous in improving, our shared home. And that's kind of like what I focus on, right? I don't really uh, focus on the us versus them sort of mentality because I don't think that those things are useful or productive, right? Like what I focus on, even in working on um, this sort of environmental project, is we all have this sort of shared interest in this case, Quinish, for either educational purposes, for understanding more about them, for establishing protections. And I think that those sort of shared interests lead to more success than thinking about, as you said, that sort of higher level background um, stuff that's happening.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think that's a common thread through all of these examples that we've heard today. Whether it's a shared wanting our kids to be able to go fishing one day down the, in 20 or 30 years, or if it's a shared interest in how people use the waterways, or if it's a shared interest in the ecology of these lakes. Finding that connection, it seems to be a key point in this citizen-based recreation, is finding that connection between the two communities and then working towards those shared goals. Um, all right. Well, we don't have a lot of time, so why don't we finish with one more question? Just, if each of you could weigh in just really briefly about what brings you hope about the shifting and evolving relationship between the outdoor recreation community and First Nations and Indigenous people in the province, and maybe one action item you would love for people to take on to sort of build on that hope and make things better. Go ahead, Rod.
Yeah, certainly. The past 2 decades have certainly demonstrated that there is the opportunity for some collaborative understanding, respect for all communities, and that's being embraced by both Indigenous and non-Indigenous individuals to a large extent. And as pointed out by Rod Peters earlier, the fact that we've been able to develop some relationships going forward, recognizing that there are going to be obstacles in the way, and some of those are considerable. But if we keep the concept of getting together, if you want to start in any area, if you want to start an initiative toward citizen-based reconciliation, just over a cup of coffee, 2 or 3 people over a cup of coffee from the different communities, Indigenous and non-Indigenous, can create some very interesting initiatives toward common issue problems, etc. So keep the communication open. Don't sweat the big stuff. I mean, the 30,000 foot level stuff, we have some extremely highly qualified people and some highly paid lawyers and politicians looking after that. Let's stay at the grassroots level.
Thank you. Yeah, that's nice. I'm not sure if Rod Peters is still with us. Mo, what about you? What gives you hope, and what would you like one thing for people to kind of work on?
Um, I'd say like what gives me hope is that there's seemingly more interest in collaboration between Indigenous and non-Indigenous folks on shared issues, and it's really just cool to see, that there are uh, allies in the work that we do, right? Um, Specifically, when we involved both BC Nature as well as the Lillooet Naturalist Club because they were really interested in not only exploring what the Queenish are, but also contributing to the project, right? Um, One thing that I would offer advice on is um, it's actually, I think, really prudent to start developing relationships with First Nations as as your various recreation organizations, because a lot of when it comes time for that consultation between the province and First Nations, it's easier for nations to say yes to a project that a recreation society might be proposing because you know we've done that background relationship building. We've done that sort of like early engagement work. Uh, say like there's an interest in building like a mountain bike trail in my territory, right? It's it would be really good if those people interested came to us and discussed it first, right? Because yeah, I think that's one thing that happens, or that is going to happen in that process is that there's that consultation that happens, right? And it makes it much easier to say yes or even get clarity on an issue um, way before consultation happens.
Yeah, yeah, it doesn't have to be in that formal process. If you've built some relationship beforehand, we definitely heard that over and over again that, yeah, do the work now. Make those relationships now before you're coming and saying, give me this, can I have this? And it feels more authentic and valuable. Yeah. Norman, closing thoughts?
Yeah, as much as there's a lot of noise and a lot of hype around some of the agreements and court cases and so on in British Columbia over the last few months, that's um, noise in the background for me as far as reconciliation goes. I am very encouraged when I have been involved in a number of presentations over the last year. People more and more are understanding the relationship of Aboriginal rights and title, what that means, what the role of citizens is and can be, and are more accepting of a reconciliation path than a litigation or ignorance path. And so I'm encouraged, and I would encourage anybody that's wants to embark on this to read the resources that are available out there. And there's a lot of good information, some of it on our website for Outdoor Recreation Council, some of it on BC Marine Trails website. Look around, there's lots of good stuff there.
Yeah. And I'll share a lot of those resources with the follow-up email. Liam.
Yeah, I would say in terms of what gives me hope, just the excitement I see from the community when we bring these sort of projects of, hey, we're working with this nation and we need volunteers to do X, Y, and Z. We just get met with overwhelming excitement. I think a lot of people, the big barrier to engaging in, sort of citizen-based reconciliation is a nervousness that they don't know how to begin, don't know how to do it right, that they're going to insult someone. And so giving them just those basic tools of, here's a format, show up, help us count fish, help us do a bake sale, get involved in putting up nest boxes with Malhat, whatever it is. There's just an overwhelming tone of excitement. In terms of advice, I would say, again, having worked with quite a few, or speaking as a settler to settlers here specifically, I've seen a trend with a lot of consultants, people with relationships with local First Nations, people who have been either formally or informally adopted into communities. This desire to put, say, settler culture, settler misunderstandings, the things we do not like about what settler colonialism has built in Canada at arm's length, as if by saying, well, look at how different I am. I'm so not going to engage with that, that they somehow absolve themselves of responsibility or kind of other that. I think it's our responsibility as non-Indigenous people in Canada to take on the difficulty of what that means and be willing to share with other settlers the lessons we have learned. Because I think in pushing away those hard conversations, in trying to other ourselves from it, we just push it onto the plate of First Nations and make it their problem to deal with. So I'm not sure if that's so clear, but yeah, be willing to have hard conversations and recognize the role, the privilege we have in the relationships we built, and the responsibilities that come with that.
All right. And I think maybe, along with those responsibilities, for everything that I'm hearing here is when we step up and we make these relationship, when we work on this, when we build this sort of stuff and try and practice reconciliation, there's a lot of benefits that come to us, lots of positive. It's like giving a gift where it feels as good to give as it is to receive, right? So that's the message I'm hearing. So I think I appreciate you all taking some time to share your knowledge with us today. I'm going to wrap things up here. We are well over time, but such a great conversation. So thank you all to the panelists for so generously sharing your knowledge with us today. And thanks for the Real Estate Foundation of BC for their support in making this webinar possible. And thanks to everyone in the audience for tuning in. Keep an eye on your inboxes this week for an email with a recording of today's webinar, plus links and other material. It's part of our regular series. And if you want to find out more about our upcoming webinars and everything else the ORCBC does, you can go to the website, orcbc.ca. And finally, please stick around for the survey. It helps us do a better job and cover topics that you want to see. It loads right after I stop talking. With that, I'll say goodbye. Good afternoon. Thank you very much for joining us and have a great rest of your day.
Thank you, Ryan. Great job.
Thanks,
Thank
everyone.
you.
Thank you.